Something in you is fading, and the people around you can feel it before you even realize it's happening. There is a very specific kind of disappearance that doesn't look like leaving. It doesn't show up as silence or distance in the obvious ways. You're still there. You still reply to messages. You still sit at the table, still nod, still ask how someone's day went. From the outside, nothing looks broken. But beneath all of that, something that used to lean toward people without effort, something that once moved instinctively, like it had its own internal direction, has quietly stopped. And the people closest to you will notice it, even if they can't explain it. They'll sense it the same way you feel the air shift before a storm rolls in. Subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. They won't have the words for it, but they'll feel it deeply enough to come to you with a kind of unease they don't fully understand. They'll bring that discomfort to you the same way they always have. Without realizing it, they'll expect you to take it in, sort through it, and hand it back to them in the form of reassurance. Because that's the role you've always played. That's the space you've always occupied. And I want to pause on that idea. Not to criticize, but to be precise. Because one of the most important patterns I've seen over and over again in people carrying this kind of exhaustion is that they are rarely experienced as individuals first. They are experienced as what they provide. They become the one who is always available, the one who never shakes under pressure, the one who can hold the difficult conversations, the heavy emotions, the things nobody else wants to carry. And they hold it all without hesitation, without resistance, without ever pushing it back. This doesn't mean they weren't loved. The love was often real. The care was genuine, but love and usefulness can become so tightly woven together that they start to look like the same thing. And for a certain kind of person, the kind of person this is about, those two things blur until neither they nor the people around them can tell where one ends and the other begins. The care they gave became the proof of love, and the role they played felt like identity. So when that role begins to shift, when the emotional connection starts to pull back, what people feel isn't the loss of a person. What they feel is the loss of something they had constant access to, something that was always there, always available, always ready, without needing to be asked for, earned, or even acknowledged. And that's the first thing you need to sit with, not as blame, not as resentment, but as clarity. Because understanding the difference between what people think they're losing and what they're actually losing is the beginning of understanding what's happening inside you. Most people misunderstand emotional disconnection in someone like you. They immediately assume something is wrong. They reach for familiar labels: burnout, depression, emotional damage. They assume this is something that needs to be fixed so you can return to who you were before. And that interpretation makes sense because it's the easiest one for everyone involved. If something is broken, it can be repaired. If something is drained, it can be refilled. Either way, the expectation is the same. You go back to the version of yourself that was always there for them. But what I've seen again and again is something entirely different. This quiet withdrawal, the stillness that follows, is not a malfunction. It's not a collapse in the way people assume. From the inside, it feels like something else entirely. It feels like a structure that has been holding everything up for years, finally completing its purpose and coming down, not because it failed, but because it was never meant to stand forever. Like scaffolding being removed once the building is finished. There was a time long before all of this when you weren't like this. There was a version of you that didn't constantly scan the room for emotional tension. A version of you that didn't automatically adjust to meet everyone else's needs. A version of you that didn't turn care into a form of survival. But that changed. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being aware of others kept you safe. That anticipating what someone needed kept you close. That making yourself useful made you necessary. And being necessary felt close enough to being secure that you stopped questioning it. That pattern became automatic, so automatic that it stopped feeling like a choice. And now what you're experiencing isn't a loss. It's the release of that pattern. But to everyone else, it feels like something is being taken away from them. It feels like distance. It feels like coldness. It feels like you've changed into someone they don't recognize. But this shift, this kind of change, isn't something you can force or control. It doesn't happen because you decided to pull away. It happens because something deeper inside you has reached its limit, and it moves on its own timeline like a tide that was always coming in, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The people who feel this change the most are rarely the ones who supported you the most. And that matters, because the strongest reactions usually come from the people whose entire connection to you was built on your availability. They didn't build something with you. They built something on you. And now that the foundation is shifting, what they're reacting to isn't you. It's the instability of what they depended on. That realization isn't comfortable. It's not meant to be. But it is clarifying, because one of the hardest parts of this transition is how it gets described by the people around you. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you've become distant. They'll say the relationship isn't the same anymore. And if you're not careful, those words will start to shape how you see yourself. You'll start to question whether you're being selfish, whether this quiet you've stepped into is actually something wrong, whether you owe it to them to go back to who you were. You don't. And to understand why, you have to look at what it cost you to be that person, not in theory, not in general terms, but specifically. Think about the conversations you carried that never had a place to land, the emotions you process for others that you never process for yourself, the constant adjustment, the constant awareness, the constant question running in the background of every interaction. What do they need from me right now? Think about how often your own needs came second or third, or didn't even make the list. That wasn't free. It didn't feel like suffering because you were used to it. It felt normal. But it was still a cost, a quiet, daily cost that built up over years. And what you're experiencing now isn't a rejection of the people in your life. It's the natural result of a system that was never meant to run forever, finally reaching its end. This doesn't come from cruelty. It doesn't come from indifference. It comes from something deeper inside you, recognizing that it can't keep going the same way. And when that happens, something shifts internally. But what's rarely talked about is what that shift feels like from the inside, because it's not relief, not at first. It's disorienting. It's quiet in a way that feels unfamiliar. You're almost unsettling, like something important is missing because something is. The internal compass you've been using your entire life, the one that pointed you toward other people's needs, goes offline. And without it, you don't immediately know where to turn. You don't immediately find yourself. You find space, silence, a lack of direction where there used to be constant movement. And that gets mistaken for numbness, but it's not numbness, it's stillness. It's the kind of stillness that comes when a room has been emptied, not broken, not damaged, just cleared. And for the first time, what fills that space is up to you. There's a moment that comes in this quiet when the confusion starts to settle, when you stop waiting for things to go back to how they were. And a different question begins to form. Not what do I do now? Not who am I supposed to be? But something much simpler and much more honest. When did I agree to live like this? And the answer, when it comes, changes everything. You didn't agree. You adapted. And those two things are not the same. Agreement implies choice, awareness. A decision made with understanding. Adaptation happens automatically, especially in environments where you learn early on that certain behaviors keep you safe, keep you connected, keep you from losing something you can't afford to lose. You didn't choose to become this person. You became this person because it worked, because it kept things stable, because it kept you close to the people you needed, because it made you valuable in a way that felt necessary. And over time, That adaptation became identity. But now, that identity is shifting. And what's underneath it isn't emptiness, it's possibility. Because when something that was driven by fear begins to loosen, what's left behind has the chance to become something chosen. And chosen care is different. It looks similar on the outside, but it feels completely different on the inside. It's not driven by obligation. It's not driven by the need to maintain connection at any cost. It's driven by willingness. And that changes everything. But understanding this isn't enough on its own, because insight without direction doesn't move you forward. So what does moving forward actually look like? It starts with something simple but incredibly difficult. Stop trying to explain yourself to people who need you to stay the same. Because no matter how carefully you choose your words, no matter how clearly you describe what you've been through, what they hear underneath it is this: you weren't who I thought you were. And that triggers defensiveness, not understanding. You don't owe anyone a detailed justification for becoming more honest about your limits. What you owe is your real presence. And presence is not the same as explanation. Presence is showing up as you are. Explanation is trying to make that acceptable. You've spent enough time negotiating your right to exist as yourself. The next step is learning how to receive. Because if you've spent your life being the one who holds everything, chances are you've never fully learned how to let yourself be held. And that doesn't change all at once. It changes in small moments. Someone asks how you are, and instead of deflecting, you answer honestly and stay there. Someone offers help, and instead of minimizing it, you accept it. Someone shows care, and instead of redirecting, you let it land, not as a performance, but as an experience. And that's uncomfortable at first because it goes against everything you've practiced. But it's necessary because being needed is not the same as being known. And for the first time, you're learning the difference. This isn't a clean transformation. It's not perfect. It doesn't follow a straight line. Some days you'll fall back into old patterns. Some days you'll overcorrect and pull too far away. But there will be moments, small, quiet moments, where you feel the old pull, recognize it, and make a different choice. And that moment is everything, because the goal was never to stop caring. It was never to become distant or closed off. It was to become someone who chooses when and how they give. Someone who opens the door not because they can't close it, but because they want to. And that difference changes the quality of everything. Because when care comes from obligation, it carries weight. When it comes from choice, it feels like a gift. And the people who truly see you, the ones who relate to you, not just what you provide, will feel that shift. They won't experience it as loss. They'll experience it as you finally arriving, more present, more real, more there than you've ever been before. And those are the relationships worth building, the ones that meet your change with curiosity, not criticism, the ones that are willing to adjust, to grow, to understand. The rest will fall away, not because you pushed them out, but because they were built on something that no longer exists. And that's not a loss in the way it feels, it's a completion. Because what's happening here isn't you disappearing. It's you finally becoming visible, not to everyone, but to the right people, at the right time, from a place that no longer runs on empty. And that is not the end of your ability to love. That is what your ability to love looks like when it finally belongs to you.